Okay, we're going to do a jump now from number 9 over to number 25. There is no reason why we have jumped out of order, except that I wanted to keep the people who are presenting one after the other. So there's no special reason why we've jumped to number 25, except that I chose number 25 as the one I wanted to talk about. It's on page 270, 271 in the art scroll, and this is the first Kinna that talks about things other than the destruction of the temple. This Kinna talks about the destruction of the it doesn't say, actually, it's an unknown community or communities thought to be in the time of the Crusades. There are other Kinnot that talk specifically about Volm, Speyer, and Mainz, but this one, which is written about the Crusades, which took place in the 11th, 12th century, does not mention the communities. And Philip's just handing out a piece of paper now, which I'm afraid the Zoomers don't have, but I will send it out when I send the recording so you can have a look at it. And what Philip is handing out now is a rewrite of this Kinna, and it's been rewritten by Rabbi Moshe Hoyer of the Orthodox Union, and it is a Kinna al Ma'oraot Zmanenu. It's a Tisha B'Av lament for October the 7th. And he has paraphrased the original Kinna, which was about the destruction of communities by wicked people, to our present day destruction of our communities by wicked people. I'm first of all going to read to you just the first few lines, the first page or so of the original Kinna, which was about the Crusades. And then I'm going to read to you and discuss with you the Kinna that Rabbi Moshe Hoyer has written for October the 7th. So the original Kinna says as follows: "Would that my head were water and my eye a fount of flowing tears, that I might spend all my days and nights weeping for my slaughtered children and infants, and for the venerable oldsters of my congregation. I call upon all of you to respond to my cry, Ve'ai woe, and cry profusely and intensify your weeping over the house of Israel and over the nation of Hashem, because they have fallen by the sword. My eye shall be filled with copious tears, and I shall get me to the weepers' field. I shall arouse the bitter of heart, the confounded ones, to weep with me over the beautiful maidens and the tender lads wrapped in their scrolls and dragged to the slaughter. Their appearance was ruddier than rubies, more dazzling than sapphires and gems, yet they were trampled and discarded like mud in the streets. Turn away from the unclean Jew, they called to each other, lest they come too close, over the house of Israel and over the nation of Hashem, because they have fallen by the sword." That's what was written. An unknown author wrote about an unknown community sometime in the Middle Ages. And I'm sure that you recognized some very poignant parts here. Okay, he writes about the youth, how they were ripped apart. The Nova Festival was full of young people trying to be peaceful and enjoy the world. They were ripped apart. The old people together with the young people. Rabbi Moshe Hoyer has written the following. I'm going to read it in English as we go, and we'll talk about it as we go along. And this is his paraphrase. This is his rewrite of the lament for the communities in the south that were ripped apart by our enemies on October the 7th, on Simchat Torah. Would my head be filled with water and my eyes a fountain of tears? I would cry all my days and nights for the corpses of my babes and infants and the aged of our people. I ask you to respond and join me in weeping, much weeping, for the house of Israel and the people of the Lord who have fallen by the sword. My eyes flow with tears, and I will take myself to the fields to weep and ask others stunned and embittered to join in my wailing for the beautiful young women and vibrant young men kidnapped and led to slaughter, more beautiful and radiant than rubies, sapphire or turquoise. They were slung and trampled like mud in the streets. For the house of Israel and the people of the Lord who have fallen by the sword. For these I cry and moan. Outside there is murder and indoors terror in Be'eri, in Re'im, Kfar Aza and Sderot. Our corpses strewn, nude and naked, bodies lying like refuse for wild beasts and animals, nursing children and the aged, young men and women, tormented by our attackers, enduring great shame. For the house of Israel and the people of the Lord who have fallen by the sword. My eyelids flow with water, dripping tears. I weep bitterly for the murdered of Tzahal, Israel's defense force. They assembled, risking everything, to courageously battle for God's name and to protect his people. The mighty who readily do his will, they were prepared to die for their love of their nation. I will moan for them with a torrent of tears, all of them deserving the greatest honor, while their families readily supported their sacrifice with strength. For them I let out a piercing cry. Along with our grief for the destruction of both temples raised today, for the house of Israel and the people of the Lord who have fallen by the sword. The festival of Simchat Torah was transformed into a day of tragedy. The day we had hoped to celebrate the gift of God's truth to our people. Instead, since that day, our eyes flow with tears. We cry and shake our heads in disbelief. The nation of the precious Torah who pursue peace and a flourishing world are depicted as corrupt murderers by the world around us. The light unto the nations dwells in darkness. For this we certainly mourn. For the house of Israel and the people of the Lord who have fallen by the sword. The enduring hatred for the eternal nation continues to grow as our enemies plot to destroy and erase any trace of Israel. For this we mourn together with the burning of the house of our God. Therefore today, Tisha B'Av, I will arouse my grief and lament and wail and cry with a bitter soul, my sighs weighing heavily from dawn to dusk. For the house of Israel and the people of the Lord who have fallen by the sword. That was the Kinna, which was written by Rabbi Moshe Hoya to commemorate the slaughter of Simchat Torah and October 7th. And I want to just, I suppose, take a different look and a sideways look as well at this whole idea of Tisha B'Av being the day of national mourning. It's been asked many times and debated amongst the rabbis and also the secular leaders whether we should have separate days of mourning for separate events. And in fact, we do have Yom HaShoah. Not everybody agrees with the concept of having a separate day for Yom HaShoah. We don't have a separate day for the destruction of the communities in southern Rhineland during the Middle Ages. That took place in the months of Iyar and Sivan. We do commemorate that because there are certain things that we normally don't say. For example, Av HaRachamim. We don't normally say that when we bench Rosh Chodesh, but we do on those months because that prayer Av HaRachamim that we say before Ashrei, before we put the Sefer Torah back on Shabbat morning, That Avarachamim, if you've ever read it, read the translation, that is about the destruction of those communities in Europe during the Crusades. So we do recognize it. But the question is, what about the day itself? Tisha B'Av was the day of national mourning. And there was various disagreements about whether we're allowed to designate a new day or not. But there is another point to this. And this is written by, I think, by Rav Stav, who's the chairman of Tzohar. And he says, but beyond Tisha B'Av always being the classical day to lament all Jewish tragedies, in the case of our own October the 7th massacre, there is a further point of connection. There's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah which talks about the assassination of Gedaliah. You'll be familiar with Tzom Gedaliah, the fast of Gedaliah, which takes place on the 3rd of Tishrei. It's actually a nidche. It's actually a fast which is pushed off because Gedaliah, who was the last Jewish governor in Israel at the time of the Romans after the destruction, he was actually murdered, assassinated by one of his own, by a Jew, on Rosh Hashanah itself. But we don't fast on Rosh Hashanah, so we push it off to the 3rd of Tishrei. It's not, by the way, a health thing that you've stuffed yourself so much for 2 days, on 2 days Rosh Hashanah, that you have to fast on the 3rd, but it happens to be healthy as well. So Gedaliah, why do we fast for Gedaliah? Right? That's another one we can't really relate to, isn't it? Most of us don't even know who Gedaliah was, what was going on. The reason that we fast on Tzom Gedaliah was that was the last nail in the coffin of sovereignty, of Jewish sovereignty at that time. Gedaliah was the last Jewish governor, and he was killed by one of his own. The same idea, just taken to a further extreme. Sin'ah between brothers. Enough that Jew should kill another Jew. So Gedaliah is very much part of this process. On Tzom Gedaliah, this coming year, when we fast on Tzom Gedaliah, we should cast our minds back to Tisha B'Av because it's all connected. And Rav Stav says, he quotes the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, which is talking about the assassination of Gedaliah. And he says, Lelamdecha, to teach us, Sheshkula mitatan shel tzadikim kisreifat beit Eloheinu. The death of tzadikim is equal to the burning of the Beit HaMikdash. What does it mean by that? The death of tzadikim is equal to the burning of our temple. And he writes like this, it's impossible for me to paraphrase it or to improve on this. He says, those killed on October the 7th and beyond were killed for one reason only, because they were Jews. They weren't killed because they were bad people. They weren't killed because they committed crimes. They were killed because they were Jews. As such, they have status of Harugei Malchut. They have the status of the great rabbis that were killed that we read about in the previous Kinna, in I think Kinna number 21. We read about the Harugei Malchut. We read about the martyrs of the time of the Romans. We read about it on Yom Kippur, in the middle of the afternoon of Yom Kippur. The people who were killed on October the 7th and beyond, Al Kiddush Hashem, have the status of Harugei Malchut. They were at the level of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon and all the others who were killed. And the Gemara says, the Chazal say in Bava Batra, nobody can stand in their midst. If indeed the sages made clear that the death of a tzaddik is on a par with the destruction of the temple, then speaking about them and their tragic end on this earth would be the most suitable thing to do on the day that the temple was destroyed. So as we bring to mind both the loss and the heroism of the too many that were killed in this long and harsh war, Yehi Ratzon, may it be Hashem's will that our authentic and wholehearted mourning turns, as per the saying of the sages, all those that mourn for Yerushalayim will be privileged to see it in its joy.